Good morning. Saturday, November 7th, 2020, year of the pandemic. And during the last 9 months, I decided to work on a project called Baseball Perspectives and Assumptions, a presupposition of baseball players' performances by Kenneth Artizone. Why did I work on this project? I'm a big baseball fan. I followed baseball for 55 years. And during the coronavirus, COVID-19, the pandemic, I had to stay home. So I was on my computer and I said, what can I do? What book can I write? And I decided baseball. I'm a fan. So here's my book. That's me on the cover. 16 years old in that photo. And on the back, this is a present day photo. That's my barn, my company name, Life Gardening, Field of Dreams. What did I write about? Well, I have a perspective on baseball. What is that? I have an assumption. What if all the players who are in the Hall of Fame performed in the same era, same ballparks, faced the same pitchers? Same with pitchers, same era, facing Hall of Fame ball players. What is the presupposition of their performance? Well, this book delved into the history and analyzed baseball players' performances. For example, in 1900, a player averaged so many hits per game. And in the year 2000, a certain player averaged a certain number of hits per game. What if both players were in the same era, facing the same pitchers, same ballparks? Who would come out better? Same with pitchers. We know that 1900, for example, Cy Young, during his era, won 511 games. And yet in the year 2000, why aren't pitchers winning 500 games? What did he do different than present day pitchers? He just pitched more? Was that it? Different era? Easier ball players to face? What if? All right, so let me get into this deeper. I'm going to use this book as a reference throughout my video, okay? Here are the names of the chapters, and I'll get into this specifically. My first chapter, I talk about loving the game. Second chapter, what if scenarios? So I examine total hits records. Second chapter, total bases records. Next chapter, total home runs records. Next, total runs batted in. Next, total runs scored records. Then in my seventh chapter, I combine all the statistics and rank 160 ball players. And these are ball players who are in the Hall of Fame. After that, I list my top 100 offensive players of all time. Next chapter, then I get into what if scenario again as far as total pitching wins. What if? Next, total strikeouts records. Next, total innings pitched records. My 12th chapter, I take the top 72 baseball pitchers who are in the Hall of Fame and I rank them. My other chapter, chapter 7, I ranked 160 ball players who are in the Hall of Fame and I ranked them. These are everyday players. Okay? Chapter 13, I list my top 100 pitchers of all time. Chapter 14, I talk about the top 50 baseball players' achievements in one day. Not one game or one day, because a lot of players have played double headers. And what did they achieve? What is the top performance? Next chapter, I talk about 112 favorite baseball records that I like. My next chapter, chapter 16, I talk about 16 teams starting lineup. From the Hall of Fame, I compiled 16 teams. And I put all these teams in a playoff. A World Series playoff, 7-game battle royale, I'm calling it. So that chapter talks about that. That's a fun chapter. I'll talk about it later. Chapter 17, my top 144 Baseball Hall of Fame players who have World Series rings. I came up with 144 of them, got a ring, and they're in the Hall of Fame. Chapter 18, I talk about my top 50 World Series games. Unique games, top 50. And what was the number one ranked game? When I get to it, I'll tell you. Chapter 19, my 64 baseball pet peeves. What is a pet peeve? Something I don't like. I list 64 things in baseball that I don't like. Called a pet peeve. Chapter 20, I list 30 baseball records right now that I hope will get broken. For example, 4 home runs in one game. I hope that record gets broken one day. I hope somebody hits 5 home runs in one game. Hasn't happened yet. Chapter 21, I list the best baseball decades, and I list them, I believe there are about 12 baseball decades, 120 years, and I count down from number 12 to number 1. What's the best baseball decade? Chapter 22, questions and answers from Professor Mack. Who's that? Me. I list, I think, about 26 baseball questions, and I answer them. Chapter 23, faithful Hall of Fame players who I admire. There are players in the Hall of Fame that I really admire, but they were faithful. What did they do? They stuck with their same team their whole career. Chapter 24, I list potential candidates for the Hall of Fame. Who should be in the Hall of Fame? Potentially. And I list their names. Chapter 25, how do I really feel about the game of baseball? I just analyze my true feelings about the game in the past and in the present. Chapter 26, it's a fun chapter. Old school versus new school baseball. Who's better, old school or new school? Chapter 27, my top 10 teams' best starting lineup and pitching rotation. What's the best starting lineup from the Hall of Fame? Who bats first? Who bats ninth? And who pitches? Who relieves? So that's a fun chapter. Chapter 28, the best 63 individual offensive seasons of all time. Who had the best offensive season of all time as far as stats? You'll be surprised who it is. Chapter 29, the best 32 individual pitching seasons of all time. Who had the best stats for one season pitching? You'll be surprised at that one. Chapter 30, the final analysis, tell the truth. Chapter 31, epilogue. So this book, 262 pages. Baseball perspectives and assumptions. All right, let me get into the details of this book, okay? In my prologue at the beginning of the book, I talk about, as a baseball fan, what am I looking for in baseball? Obviously, greatness. Talent is the key. Who's valuable to their team? Who's noteworthy in history? I don't talk about defense or fielding. I talk about offensive performances. So in my prologue, I talk about that. I look for longevity, consistency. No players who use steroids are in this book. I'm sorry, their stats are in question. And also, no players who are presently playing are in this book. This book mainly focuses on players whose career is over and they're in the Hall of Fame. Few exceptions. Who's the greatest baseball player of all time? Well, in my prologue, I give my opinion. The belief, judgment, school of thought, and point of view of many researchers is Babe Ruth, the greatest of all time. I agree with this sentiment. A lot of polls and surveys and analysis come to the conclusion he had the best accumulated stats because he played in the time period from 1914 to 1935. But you should know that he pitched for 3 or 4 years in the beginning. Then he started his offensive stats. So in about a 17 to 18 year period, he comes up with 714 home runs, 2,200 RBIs, 2,800 hits, lifetime batting average 342, on base percentage 47% of the time, 690 slugging, and he is just considered the greatest, and I agree. Who's the best hitter of all time? Not the best ball player of all time, but the best hitter. You got to give it to Ty Cobb. He has all the records, 90 records. Well, he played from 1905 to 1928. 4,100 hits, 366 career lifetime batting average, 2,200 runs scored, 1,900 RBIs, 724 doubles, 295 triples, 897 stolen bases, 23 consecutive years batting over 300, and 12 batting titles. Best hitter of all time, according to the analysis, perspective, and assumption. Who's the most consistent ball player of all time? Consistency, longevity. You can count on him year after year after year. Got to give that to Hank Aaron. Most runs batted in, 2,200. Extra base hits, 1,400. Total bases, 6,856. 3,700 hits. Runs scored, 2,100. 17 consecutive seasons with 150 or more hits in the season. Of course, we know he has the most home runs, 755. You got to put Stan Musial, also very consistent. 331 lifetime batting average, 3,600 hits, 1,900 RBIs, plays in 3,000 games, 1,900 runs scored, doubles, 725. Also, you got to give consistency to Willie Mays. 302 lifetime, 660 home runs, 1,900 runs batted in, and 3,200 hits. Willie Mays, wow, what a player. Who's the most splendid hitter of all time? Got to give that to Ted Williams. Most valuable player twice, 6 times batting champion, 2 triple crowns, 344 lifetime batting average, 521 home runs, 482 on base percentage. That's number 1. So as far as splendid, got to give it to Ted Williams and also Joe DiMaggio. Only plays 13 years, but 1,500 runs batted in, 56-game hitting streak. Jumpin' Joe DiMaggio. These are the splendid hitters. Who's the most steady, stable, and constant hitters of all time? Got to give it to Tony Gwynn, 338 lifetime batting average. But here, 19 out of 20 years, he bats over 300. And the 1 year he did not, he batted 289. He came the closest to having his whole 20-year career 300 or over, batting average 300 or over. So you got to put him as a steady, stable, and constant. He has 8 batting titles. Also, you got to give Honus Wagner credit, 329 lifetime, 3,400 hits, 8 batting titles. How about Roger Hornsby? 2,900 hits, 300 home runs, but his lifetime batting average is number 2 behind Ty Cobb. Hornsby, 358 lifetime batting average. All right. So those are the stable hitters of all time. How about the most exciting? How about Rickey Henderson? 1,400 stolen bases. It's not easy to steal a base. And he does it 1,400 times. He also has the most walks, most leadoff home runs. How about Pete Rose? Exciting Charlie Hustle. 4,256 hits in 24 years. He has the most games, over 3,500. Most at bats, 14,000. And most seasons with 200 or more hits, 10 of them. Would I vote for Pete Rose to be in the Hall of Fame? Yes, I would. Who's my favorite player of all time? Lou Gehrig, the Iron Horse. Not only does he have the consecutive game streak of 2,100 games, impressive, but he has a career batting average of 340, 632 slugging, 447 on base, 493 home runs, 1,900 RBIs. He considers himself the luckiest man on the face of the earth. That's Lou Gehrig. Who do I consider the greatest pitcher of all time? Walter Johnson. 110 shutouts, 417 wins, 531 complete games. Strikeouts, 3,500. He does this for a last place team, the Washington Senators. If he plays for the New York Yankees, or the Boston Red Sox, or the Chicago Cubs, or the Philadelphia A's during that time period, in the early part of the 1900s and 1920s, he probably has over 600 wins, and that would be number 1. So he's the greatest pitcher of all time, my opinion. Who's the most uniform, orderly, and unvarying pitchers of all time? Got to give to Cy Young, 511 wins, most innings, over 7,000 innings, most games started, 815, complete games, 749. He has 3 no-hitters, including a perfect game. Also, as far as being the uniform pitcher of all time, you got to give it to Grover Cleveland Alexander. Lifetime winning percentage of 642, 373 wins. Who's the most forceful and dominating pitcher of all time? Got to give that to Nolan Ryan. 7 no-hitters, 324 wins, and 5,714 strikeouts. Also, as far as forceful and dominating, you got to give Randy Johnson props. 303 career victories, over 4,800 strikeouts, 2 no-hitters, including a perfect game. He struck out 20 batters in one game. And also, as far as forceful and dominating as a pitcher, you got to give it to Sandy Koufax, 4 no-hitters, including a perfect game. He only played 12 years. Who's my favorite pitcher of all time? Christy Mathewson. 373 wins, 665 winning percentage. Very good. 79 career shutouts. Of course, we all know the 1905 World Series against the Philadelphia Athletics. Christy Mathewson pitched 3 games in that series. All 3 games were shutouts. 27 innings, no runs. And he pitched complete game victories, and they win the World Series. How about that stat? So, Baseball Perspectives and Assumptions, the title of my book. I'm going to look into baseball players' performances and compare them with the old school versus the new school, all right? So I'll be talking about this book on this video, just giving an overview of what I wrote about, okay? Next chapter is Loving the Game. I talk about my childhood. I talk about I was born in Chicago, Illinois. Then my parents moved to California. We relocated in Los Angeles and in a community called Granada Hills, California. I played sandlot baseball during that time. It was in the 1960s. I'd say from 62 through 66. Just got some friends in the neighborhood, went out, got a bat and a ball, some gloves, made some bases, found an empty sandlot, and just hit the ball all over the yard. I remember I think I hit 25 home runs in one day. The fences were short. Pitcher would throw it, I hit it over the fence. And you know what the rule was? The guy who hit it over the fence had to go retrieve the ball and bring it back. That was fun. We played sandlot baseball. So that's how I got started in baseball, loving the game. Then my dad took me to Dodger Stadium in Los Angeles. I saw a game. So I became a fan. And then after I got married, I had 4 children. I had 3 sons. I put them in Little League, and I became the manager. And over a 10-year period, I coached and managed 330 Little League baseball games. Came in second place one game. Went to the championship. We lost 5-2. Should have won that game. I think I had 2 of my players on my team thrown out at the plate. They don't throw if they're safe at home, the score is closer and maybe we win it. That's the closest I came to winning a championship in Little League. It was fun. 10 years, 330 Little League games I coached. And then what we did during the summer, we took vacations. And we visited a lot of ballparks. San Francisco, Candlestick Park. I took my family went to see a baseball game. Candlestick Park. Petco Park in San Diego is called Jack Murphy Stadium. So we saw the Padres. We saw the Giants. We saw the Atlanta Braves. We were in Georgia, went to a game. We went to Baltimore, Camden Yards. We saw the Orioles play. We went to Philadelphia, saw the Phillies play. Went to Chicago, saw Wrigley Field. We saw the Cubs play. I didn't make it to Yankee Stadium, didn't make it to Red Sox Stadium. I took a trip up to Seattle. I saw the stadium, took a tour of that. So I visited a lot of ballparks. Oh, Arizona, saw the Diamondbacks play. And in Texas, saw the Rangers play in Arlington, Texas. So I've seen teams in California, Washington State, Arizona, Texas. Where else? I've got a map up there. Let's see, Illinois, Pennsylvania, Georgia, Ohio. I forgot Ohio. I saw Cincinnati Reds play. So I've gone all over. And, of course, Dodger Stadium. So in my chapter of loving the game, you know what was really a thrill? We went and saw, my wife and I, and the family, we went to Cooperstown, New York, and saw the Baseball Hall of Fame. What a joy that was. I've been there twice. You got to see it, Cooperstown. So I've read a lot of baseball books. I've seen a lot of baseball movies. Field of Dreams, Pride of Yankees, 8 Men Out, The Sandlot. Also, I watched Ken Burns' documentary of baseball, 20 hours. Was it 20 hours? Yeah, 2 hours per video, 10 discs, 20 hours of baseball history. You got to see that. You know what I did also when I turned about 45 years old? I joined a hardball baseball league. It's called the North County Adult Men Baseball League. Wood bats, real baseballs, 9 innings in a ballpark, and we play games. And I've done that for about 20 years. I'd say in 20 years, I probably played in about 200 baseball games. I think I have about 200 hits for my career batting stat for 20 years, 200 hits. One season I batted over 550. Other seasons I batted 400. I've had 5 hits in a game. I pitched in games too. So in my chapter, Love the Game, I talk about as a child, I got interested in baseball by the Sandlot baseball. Then I went to Dodger Stadium with my dad, got interested. Then I watched TV and saw baseball games. And then when I got married, I had kids, and I got involved in managing and coaching in the Little League. And then we took vacations. We went to ballparks and saw teams play. And then when I was 46 years old, I joined a baseball league, and I'm still playing. So that's my chapter on loving the game. All right, I'll try to get through these other chapters. I have other videos where I talk about the metrics. You can check them out on the YouTube. Type in Ken Artizone, and you'll see all my metric videos. For example, chapter 2 talks about the total hits records. And I list who had the best percentage of hits per game. Ed Delantale. Ed Delantale. Have you heard that name? He's in the Hall of Fame. He played from 1888 to 1903. He averaged 1.41 hits per game. He played 1,800 games and had over 2,500 hits. So if you project his total, he's the best percentage of hits per game in baseball history. 1.41 hits per game. So I talk about who's number 1 in hits. Pete Rose. He got over 4,000 hits in over 3,500 games. So in the What If chapter, and I talk about this in the metric video that I did before that you could check out, because I really get detailed. But I just take the what if scenario. What if Ed Delantale played in 3,562 games? If he averaged 1.41 hits per game, and he plays 3,562 games, what is his total hits total? He's number 1. He would have over 5,029 hits. based on his percentage of 1.41 hits per game. So I analyzed that in that chapter. The metric video gets very detailed. Check that out. It's on YouTube. 2 was Ty Cobb, 3 Willie Keeler, 4 Jesse Burkett, 5 Dan Brothers, 6 George Sisler, 7 Cap Hansen, 8 Billy Hamilton, 9 Al Simmons, 10 Hugh Duffy. Those are the top 10. And all these guys are old school players. But then I get into, you see, I get the chapter, in that chapter, I analyze it. And I came up with 60 players and what their percentages were. Interesting, Pete Rose has the most hits, right? But he ends up 35 on the list, according to projection, perspective, an assumption, and a presupposition. Following me? So that's that chapter. Then I get into chapter 3, what is the total bases record? And I do the what if scenario. You know, came out number 1 with that one? Lou Gehrig. Even though Henry Aaron holds the record for the most total bases, if you project that if Lou Gehrig plays the same amount of games as Henry Aaron, he comes out number 1 as far as projection, because he averaged 2.33 total bases per game his whole career. He comes up number 1. He would have over 7,700 total bases if you project it and pre-assume if he plays the same number of games as the number 1 holder, total base record holder, who is Henry Aaron. Henry played over 3,200 games. So if Lou Gehrig plays over 3,200 games, he comes up number 1. So that's that chapter, total bases. Then the next chapter is total home runs. Same scenario. Project if they play certain amount of games in the same era, who would be number 1? Well, we know Henry Aaron is number 1, 755 home runs. But did you know that he did it in 3,298 games? Babe Ruth's number 2 with 714 home runs. But Babe only played 2,500 games. So add the games. Add 795 more games for Babe Ruth. Now he has 3,298 games. How many home runs would Babe have hit according to his percentage of home runs per game? Following me? Well, Babe in 2,500 games hit 714 home runs. So his percentage, 0.285 home runs per game. It's not 1 home run per game, because if he plays 2,500 games, you have 2,500 home runs. No. And it's not half, it's not 0.50, because then if he plays 2,500 games, divided in half, that's 1,300 games, right? 1,275 games. So if his percentage was 0.50, he would have hit 1,250 home runs, but he didn't. He only hit 714. So that's how you get his percentage down to 0.285, which is basically about 1/4 of the time he would hit a home run per game played. So in this chapter, I talk about if Babe plays the same amount of games as Henry Aaron, how many home runs? He comes up number 1, Babe Ruth. He'd have 941 home runs. Following me. So I have the chart again, and I list 50 players and their percentage of home runs per game and who comes out there. In the metric video that I did, I analyze the home runs per game. You got to check that video out. This video is just highlighting this book and giving the overview, okay? Then after that, I get into total runs batted in record. What if? Who came out number 1 there? Well, according to this, Sam Thompson played 1,400 games and had 1,300 RBIs. I mean, it's 0.927% of RBI per game. He came out number one. So I analyze again. Henry Aaron, he holds the record, but he does it. He has 2,297 RBIs, but he does it in 3,298 games. So if Sam Thompson plays 3,298 games, according to his percent of RBIs per game, how many RBIs does he end up with? And he came out with 3,058 RBIs. So that's that chapter. Then I get the last chapter on this baseball performance is a total runs scored. Who's number one? Rickey Henderson. But he played 3,081 games. Who, according to assumption, would be the number one run scored baseball player of all time? Billy Hamilton. Because his percent was he scored 1.06 run per game in his career. 1,594 games he played, and he scored 1,679 runs. That's more than a run a game. So he'd come out on top, 3,274 runs scored, if he plays the same amount of games as Rickey Henderson. The metric video that I did analyzes the hits, total bases, RBIs, home runs, and runs scored. And I get into detail there. This book, I have it all written down, okay? Then Chapter 7 of Baseball Perspectives. I talk about the 160 baseball players who are in the Hall of Fame, combine their stats, and rank them. Who's number one? Well, in order to get the ranking, I add their hits, how many hits they had in their career, how many runs scored they have in their career, how many RBIs they have in their career, and their batting average for their career. Add up hits, number one, runs, number two, RBIs, number three, and batting average, number four, as one total number. Who comes out number one? Ty Cobb. 4,000 hits, 2,200 runs, 1,900 RBIs, 366 batting average, career. His total number is 8,745. So I rank baseball players in the Hall of Fame. Rank them. Cobb is 1, Aaron 2, Pete Rose 3, Stan Musial 4, Camp Hansen 5, 6, Babe Ruth, 7, Willie Mays, 8, Carl Yastrzemski, 9, Tris Speaker, 10, Honus Wagner, and I go 160 of them in the Hall of Fame. Number 160 was Roger Bresnahan. He was a catcher. His total number was only 2,743. And Ty Cobb's number was 8,745. Be interested to know. So I had a lot of fun doing that, looking over all the stats. Chapter 8, I talk about my top 100 offensive players of all time. And I count down from number 1 all the way through, list their stats. You can see right here. For example, number 1, Harry Heidelman. He's number 100. If I go all the way down to number 1, you want to know the top 10 that I consider? Well, turn the pages from 100 to number 10. Who was 10? Tony Gwynn. 9, Honus Wagner. 8, Stan Musial. 7, Lou Gehrig. 6, Ted Williams. 5, Roger Hornsby. 4, Willie Mays. 3, Hank Aaron, 2, Ty Cobb, and number 1, Babe Ruth. Okay, so that chapter was a lot of fun. Chapter 9, then I get into the metrics of the pitching wins record. In my metric video, I have a separate video on pitching. What if? We know Cy Young has the most wins, but he did it in a certain amount of games. He did it in 906 games. He won 511. But if someone else pitched in 906 games, how many victories would they have ended up with according to the percentage of wins? Kid Nichols came out number 1. 621 games, but he had a winning percentage of .58. So he would have ended up with 532. That's more than Cy Young. So that's what that chapter is about. Okay. You want to know the order there? Well, I have 54 pitchers, and I ranked them. Kid Nichols 1, Christy Mathewson 2, Charlie Radburn 3, Tim Keefe 4, Cy Young 5, Mickey Welsh 6, Pete Alexander 7, Amos Rusi 8, Joe McKinney 9, and Eddie Plank 10. These are old school guys. All right, I talk about that chapter. Then I get into the what if total strikeouts record. Same scenario, same metric, I have it. Who comes out number 1 there? Randy Johnson beats Nolan Ryan because he averaged 7.9 strikeouts per game. Nolan Ryan was 2 at 7.1 strikeouts per game. So I analyze if Ryan and Johnson play the same number of games, who has the most strikeouts? Randy Johnson, according to the metric there. All right, and then I get into total innings pitched, chapter 11. Who had the most innings pitched? Well, Cy Young, 7,356. But what if someone else pitched 7,356 innings? What would their percentage be, according to what their career was? A guy named Charlie Radburn came out on top on that metric, 8.6 innings. For every game he pitched, he averaged 8.6 innings, almost a complete game. He comes out number 1 in total innings. Okay, so that's that chapter. Then I rank the top 72 baseball pitchers of all time. I rank them. And how do you rank them again? You add their innings, add their strikeouts, and add wins and saves as one total number. Who comes out on top on that one? Nolan Ryan. 5,300 innings, 5,700 strikeouts, 324 wins, 3 saves. He comes out with a number of 11,427 as one number. So I rank the combined stats. Ryan was 1, 2 Cy Young, 3 Walter Johnson, 4 Steve Carlton, 5 Randy Johnson. Okay, so that's what that chapter's about, and I've got all the stats. You can see I did a lot of research. Then I list my top 100 pitchers of all time according to my opinion in chapter 13. Number 100 was Al Spalding. But who comes out number 1? Well, I'll get to the top 10. How many do I got here? 100. And the top 10? 10, Lefty Grove. 9, Greg Maddux. 8, Grover Cleveland Alexander. 7, Warren Spahn. 6, Randy Johnson. 5, Nolan Ryan. 4, Cy Young. 3, Sandy Koufax. 2, Christy Mathewson. And number 1, Walter Johnson. Okay, chapter 14. I get into my top 50 baseball players' achievements in one day, and I've got 50 of them. The best achievements in one day, for example, number 50 on the list, Pete Rose, September 11th, 1985, break Ty Cobb's all-time hits record with his 4,192 hit. So I list achievements. 49, Hugh Duffy bats .440. 48, Jim Abbott with one hand pitches a no-hitter. I list 40 of them. And who was number 1 on that one? A guy named Larry. In the metric video, No, I have a separate video on this chapter, and it's called the 17 Top Baseball Achievements in One Day. Check that video out, and you'll see I really analyze the top 17. According to this book, who was number one? A guy named Nate Colbert. What did he do in one day? That is the number one achievement in baseball history, according to my opinion and perspective. He hit 5 home runs and had 13 RBIs in one day. It was a doubleheader. First game, 2 home runs. I think he had 7 RBIs. No, 5 RBIs. Second game, 3 home runs, 8 RBIs. One day, 5 home runs, 13 RBIs. Whew. So that's that chapter. Chapter 15, I talk about my 112 favorite baseball records. That's very detailed. I have a video on that. Check that out. And what's my favorite baseball record of all time? Number 1. The career batting average of Ty Cobb at .366. Plays 24 years, and his career batting average is .366. Number 1. I list other favorite baseball records. For example, highest batting average in one season, Hugh Duffy, 440. Career home runs for one season, most hits in a season, so forth. On base, slugging, triples, doubles. So that's what that chapter is about. Okay, I'll get to my next chapter, chapter 16. I took 16 teams. No, I took a lot of players from the Hall of Fame and compiled them into 16 teams. Drew their names out of a hat. Came up with 16 teams. And I put them in a World Series Game 7 Battle Royale. And what happened there? Well, I have all 16 players' career stats, added them up as a total number. And who came out at number 1 on that one? Listen to this team. These are in the Hall of Fame. Who came out, according to my picking them out of a hat and putting them together? Mike Piazza, George Kelly, Mule Suttles, Ryan Sandberg, Chipper Jones, Pie Traynor, Ricky Henderson, Tim Raines, Kirby Puckett, Hank Aaron, Derek Jeter. I added all their stats up. They had the most stats. Total number. And then the pitchers were Joe McKinney, Gaylord Perry, Nolan Ryan, Rube Liddell, and Mariano Rivera. So all these 16 teams played each other, names drawn out of a hat, and compiled the team. Add their stats up, and that team won the World Series. You have to get into the chapter to get the detail of what I'm talking about. But it's kind of fun to do that. Okay. Then I talk about chapter 17, the top 144 Baseball Hall of Fame players with World Series rings. 144. Who has the most rings? Yogi Berra had 10 World Series rings. 2, Joe DiMaggio with 9. 3, Bill Dickey had 7. Phil Rizzuto had 7. Mickey Mantle had 7, and Babe Ruth had 7. Lou Gehrig had 6, Whitey Ford 6, Red Ruffing 6, and Lefty Gomez with 5. So I talk about the top 144 Baseball Hall of Fame players who have World Series rings. And then in that chapter, I talk about there are 72 players in the Hall of Fame who never got a World Series ring. Feel sorry for them. And then I talk about players who never even got to the World Series in their whole career. That was a sorrowful thing to discover. Chapter 18, my top 50 World Series games. So I go from 50 all the way down to number 1. For example, 50 on the list is Joe Carter hits a 3-run home run in the bottom of the ninth to win it for the Toronto Blue Jays. I list all the games, remarkable achievements. Don Larson, perfect game. Top 5, Kirk Gibson hits a walk-off home run to win game 1. 4, Don Larson. 3, Carlton Fisk hits a home run to win the game. And then number 2, Bill Mazeroski hits a walk-off home run in game 7. Game 7, walks off. And of course, the number 1 achievement of World Series is Christy Mathewson's 3rd game in the 1905 World Series. He had already won 2 games in the World Series, and he complete game shutout. He comes into the 3rd game, pitches 9 innings, complete game shutout, and they win the World Series. Christy Mathewson, I ranked him number 1. Okay. Chapter 19, 64 baseball pet peeves, my top. That's an interesting chapter. I can't talk about all 64 right now. But for example, number 64 on the list, owners need to stop paying players $40 million a year to appear in 100 games, have 15 home runs, 55 RBIs, and a batting average of .250. Owners need to stop doing that. That's a pet peeve. And same thing with pitchers, 63 on the list. Owners need to stop paying pitchers $30 million a year to win 10 games and then eventually go on the injured list. It's called a pet peeve. So I break this down. I go all the way down. Hot dogs should not cost $6. Small Coke should not cost $5. I get into all my pet peeves. I will steal home if I want to. I talk about pink bats. Ridiculous. What's number 1 on this list? Please, owners of ballparks, it's my number 1 pet peeve. Will you let a family of 4 attend a baseball game? And please don't charge them $500 to attend the game, because the tickets for 4 of them would be about $300, $75 average. Then hot dogs and Cokes and popcorn and peanuts, another $100. And then if you want to buy a souvenir, another $50. And if you want a jersey, $200. So that's what my number 1 pet peeve. But I list about 64 of them. Kind of fun. Chapter 20. Hope these 30 baseball records are broken. I talked about, I hope 5 home runs are hit in 1 game. I hope someone breaks the 56-game hitting streak of Joe DiMaggio. I hope the career batting average, 366, is broken. It won't be, though. How about a batting average in 1 season of 440? I like to see that broken. That won't happen. I talk about 20 baseball records. All right, 21, I talk about the best baseball decades. 13 decades on that one. Number 13 on the list was the 1870 to the 1880 decade, because baseball was just getting started, but you had some significant things happen. Cap Hansen, Bud Galvin, Will White, John Montgomery Ward, Jim O'Rourke. A lot of things happened in that decade. That's 13 on the list, and I list down, I go down to number 1. What was the best decade? 1920 to 1930. Here, I'll list the decades for you. 13, 1870 to 1880. Next, 1880 to 1890. Next, 1890 to 1900. Okay. Then number 10 on the list, 1990 to 2000, as far as rank. Then 1980 to 1990, then 1910 to 1920 was pretty good. 1930 to 1940, 1970 to 1980, 1940 to 1950, 1960 to 1970, 1950 to 1960. What a decade. Whew. Number 2 on the list, 1900 to 1910. Why? Christy Masterson, Rube Liddell, Eddie Plank, Ty Cobb, Honus Wagner, Frank Chance, Fred Clark, Sam Crawford, George Davis, Johnny Evers, Elmer Flick, World Series. What a decade, 1900-1910, but the best was 1920 to 1930. Why? Walter Johnson, Dazzy Vance, Wade Hope, Pie Traynor, Babe Ruth, Lou Gehrig, Jim Bottomley, Joe Sewell, Sam Rice, Bill Terry, Roger Hornsby. What a decade. Whew. Chapter 22. Questions and answers from Professor Mack. Do you like the designated hitter rule? And then I answer the question. No, I don't. Why? I like to see the pitcher hit. Another question. Do you know about where the game of baseball originated? Looks like England. Another question. What's the hardest position to play in baseball? The pitcher, obviously. Should players using steroids be inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame? Depends. If they have an astounding career for 15 years and in the last couple of years they use steroids, what about all the stats for the first 15 years? Barry Bonds and some of these guys. I would say it depends. So I've got 22 questions. How many questions do I have there? About 22 questions there. Do you like interleague play? Are ticket prices too high? Who would you pitch in Game 7 of the World Series? I'd take Christy Masterson. Greatest team of all time, 1939 Yankees. Are you in favor of the shift? No. Best baseball player. What's more difficult, pitching a no-hitter or hitting 4 home runs in a game? 4 home runs in a game. 4 home runs in a game is harder. Okay, so that's that chapter. Then I talk about chapter 23, the faithful Hall of Fame players who I admire. Why? Why do I admire them? They stay with their team their entire career. Did you know that Brooks Robinson holds the records? 23 years with the Baltimore Orioles. Carl Yastrzemski, 23 years with the Boston Red Sox. That is called faithful, and I admire that. Stan Musial, 22 years with the Cardinals. Mel Ott, 22 years with the Giants. Al Kaline, 22 years with the Tigers. George Brett, 21 years with the Royals. Walter Johnson, 21 years with the Senators. Do you like players switching teams? Rickey Henderson was on 6 different teams. Reggie Jackson went from the Oakland A's to the New York Yankees. Come on, Reg. Stay with the Oakland A's. Tony Gwynn, 20 years with the Padres. Willie Stargell, 21 years with the Pirates. Derek Jeter, 20 years with the Yankees. So that's an interesting chapter. Chapter 24, potential candidates for the Hall of Fame. Who should be in? Well, I compare a player's stat who is in right now with a guy who had a career similar to it. So, for example, Tony Mullane, he won 284 games. He's not in the Hall of Fame. Why? Jim McCormick, 265 wins. I compare him with Red Faber, who is in. So I do that chapter of comparisons. I think Tony Mullane should be in. I think Pete Rose should be in. Jim McCormick, Jimmy Ryan, Bill Buckner, he should be in. John Franco, Will Clark, Oral Hershiser, Vida Blue, David Cohn, Jim Cott, Ted Lyons, Bernie Williams. And then I compare. Don Manley should be in. Okay, that's that chapter. Tommy John, Kurt Schilling. Okay, chapter 25. How do I really feel about the game of baseball? Well, I talk about memorable events. Did you know I saw a no-hitter? I went to a game in San Diego. And a guy in the Cardinals named Bud Smith pitched a no-hitter, and I was at the game. How about that? And then momentous events, Kirk Gibson's home run, unexpected, Bobby Thompson wins a playoff game, unforgettable, Henry Aaron, extraordinary, Harvey Haddix pitches 12 perfect innings. Astounding, Ted Williams goes 6 for 8 in a doubleheader and finishes the season batting .406. Inspiring, preeminent, so that's how I feel on this chapter. Chapter 26, I talk about old school versus new school baseball. Who's better? According to my analysis, presupposition and assumption and perspective, old school wins over new school. What does old school mean? I say from 1871 to 1950. That's old school. And then 1950 through 2020 is new school. And I compare the stats of those players versus the old versus the new. Old school beats them out. They had better batting averages. Okay. New school had more home runs. Why? Ballparks are smaller. But RBIs, about the same. Runs scored, there were more in the old school. Total bases, more in the old school. Pitching wins, more in the old school. Strikeouts, new school. So I compare that. Old school had better stats than the new school. That's an interesting chapter there. Chapter 27, I talk about my top 10 best starting lineups. My starting lineup. Who's number 1? Here's the batting order. Ty Cobb, Tony Gwynn, Babe Ruth, Lou Gehrig, Ted Williams, Hank Aaron, Willie Mays, Roger Hornsby, and Stan Musial. How about that lineup? And who's pitching? Walter Johnson, Christy Matheson, Sandy Koufax, Nolan Ryan, and Randy Johnson. And then I list 10 teams starting lineup. Okay, that chapter. Chapter 28, the best 63 individual offensive seasons of all time. Who had the best season of all time? Billy Hamilton. According to adding a total number of the stat per season. What do you add up? First, how many runs scored? How many home runs? Triples, doubles, singles, runs batted in, walks, stolen bases, and batting average. All is one number. Billy Hamilton in 1894 had the highest score. He scored 198 runs. He had 4 home runs. Big deal. 15 triples. Big deal. 25 doubles. Average. He had 181 singles. This is one season. He had 90 runs batted in. Pretty good. Walked 128 times. Stole 100 bases and batted .403. Add all those numbers up and he comes up with 1144, number 1. Best season of all time. Who's number 2? Hugh Duffy. 3, Babe Ruth. 4, Ty Cobb. 5, Babe Ruth again. 6, Lou Gehrig. 7, Ty Cobb. 8, Lou Gehrig. 9, Roger Hornsby. 10, Lou Gehrig. And I add up 63 individual seasons. Billy Hamilton, number 1. Hugh Duffy. He's number 2. Okay. Billy Hamilton's score was 1144, and then Duffy was 1096. See, a little under it. Babe Ruth, 1092. He's number 3. Ty Cobb, 1069. Babe Ruth again, 1064. See. Billy Hamilton, 1894 season. And Hugh Duffy was the 1894 season. Then Babe Ruth's best season was 1921. Ty Cobb's best season was 1911. Babe Ruth 1923 season was pretty good. Then Lou Gehrig and so forth. So I got 63 there. That's a good chapter. All right. Then I do chapter 29, the best 32 individual pitching performances in one season. Who comes out number one there? Charlie Radbourn, Old Hoss Radbourn. 1884 season, won 60 games, pitched 678 innings, and had 441 strikeouts. Total score, 1179. 2 on the list, Bud Galvin. 3, Tim Keefe. 4, Charlie Radbourn again. 5, John Clarkson. 6, Bud Galvin. 7, Amos Ruzzi. 8, John Clarkson. 9, Mickey Welsh. 10, Tim Keefe. All old school. Any new school guys come on this list? Yeah, Nolan Ryan did, and so did Sandy Koufax and Bob Feller. Okay. Chapter 30, final analysis. Numbers tell the truth. And you want to know who the best ball players of all time. This is how you do it. Who had the most batting titles in their career? Ty Cobb. So I list who has the most batting titles. Cobb, Gwynn, Wagner, okay. Carew, Musial, Swansby. Then home run titles, who had the most? Babe Ruth. Runs scored titles, Babe Ruth. Total bases title, Henry Aaron. On base percentage titles, this is how many times they won the title in that particular category for the season. Slugging percentage titles, most hits titles, singles titles, doubles titles, triples titles, extra base hit titles, stolen base titles, base on balls, and then pitching wins, earned run average, innings, strikeouts, shutouts, games. So, just to give you a little teaser here. Most batting titles, Ty Cobb. Most home run titles, Babe Ruth. Most runs batted in titles, Camp Benson. Most runs scored titles, Babe Ruth. Total bases titles, Henry Aaron. On base percentage titles, Ted Williams. Slugging percentage titles, Babe Ruth. Most hits titles, Ty Cobb. Most singles titles, Nellie Fox. Doubles titles, Stan Musial. Triples titles, Sam Crawford. Extra base hits titles, Stan Musial. Stolen base titles, Ricky Henderson. Base on balls titles, Babe Ruth. Most pitching wins titles, Warren Spahn. Earned run average titles, Lefty Grove. Most innings pitched titles, Pete Alexander. Most strikeout titles, Walter Johnson. Most shutout titles, Walter Johnson. Most complete game titles, Warren Spahn. Then we come to the epilogue. And a prologue and then an epilogue. And I just analyze and talk about the old school players beat out the new school ball players. Because in those days, they only made $1,000 to $500. The old school guys, their salary is only $1,000 to $500,000 for the season. Spring training workouts were less. Uniforms were baggy, loose shirts, pants. You were cut from the team if you were no good. Ballparks were large. The baseball was dead, dirty, and worn out. Runs scored were rare. Players choked up. Bats were heavy. Gloves were small. The strategy in those days was to get on base, bunt, advance runners, steal bases, hit and run. Very few signs, no pregame meetings, all day games, no substitutions, very rare pinch hitters. Travel was on trains, cramped sleeper cars, no air conditioning, double headers. Players played with migraines, fractures, hamstrings, toothaches, and flus, and yet look at their stats. That's the old school ball players. How about the new school? Well, their salaries are higher. They have special coaches, trainings, videos. They have ballparks with batting cages. They make millions of dollars. Uniforms are clean, gloves are better, bats are better, ballparks are better. They can play day or night. They travel much easier. They stay in nice hotels, and they have a lot of doctors that help them out. Yeah, look at their stats. So my baseball perspective and assumption book took one final assumption. What if Ken Artizone, me, played in the big leagues? What would my stats be? These are my dream stats. The one record that has not been broken is for a baseball player to play 20 years and bat 300 every season or higher for every season. Tony Gwynn came the closest, 19 out of 20, and he batted 289 in that 1 year. All the other years was over 300. Ty Cobb was over 300 in 23 out of 24, but he batted 240 in that one season he didn't. Ted Williams came close. Cap Anson came close. So my dream stat, and I list this at the end. There it is. I played 20 years. And what did I do for 20 years? I batted over 300 every year. That's my dream stat. And then to make the Hall of Fame. Career batting average 324. But every year for 20 years, I batted over 300. That would be my goal. I don't care about the home runs, RBIs. That would be my, for 20 years, 324 lifetime batting average and over 3,500 hits. That would be my dream. And then to be in the Hall of Fame. And I close it out by saying this. To me personally, what would I rather have? 10 World Series rings, like Yogi Berra, or a career batting average of over 300, 500 home runs, 1,800 RBIs, and I make the Hall of Fame. Would I rather have 10 World Series rings and bat 250 and not be in the Hall of Fame, or no World Series rings, but yet I bat over 300 for my career, I have over 500 home runs, 1,800 RBIs, and I make the Hall of Fame? A ring or the Hall of Fame? I would take the Hall of Fame and no rings. I think that's the most honor you could have as a baseball player. So, but how about Yogi Berra? He's got both 10 rings and he's in the Hall of Fame. But his career batting average was not over 300. 300 home runs, good ball player. I think the batting average is what makes a ball player. Ty Cobb, 366. Roger Hornsby, 358. Whew. What would I rather have? 750 home runs or a batting average of 350 career? I would take the batting average, 350. What would I rather have? 2,000 RBIs or a career batting average of 20 years of over 350? I would take the batting average. So you can see I'm biased toward the batting average. As far as pitching wins, what would I rather have? 300 wins or 5,000 strikeouts? I'd take the wins. What would you rather have? An earned run average of 1.50 and 200 wins, or an earned run average of 3.50 and 300 wins? I take the 300 wins, so I'm biased toward the wins. Okay. All right, that's my baseball Perspectives and assumptions. A list of presuppositions of baseball players' performances. What do you think? All right, Ken Arlezone, November 7th, 2020. I'm out.